Hey friends, Cowboy Joe Boo here with the Joe Boo Sports Report, and as always, thank you guys for watching, commenting, and subscribing to the Joe Boo Sports Report. Well, by now I know everybody's heard that the Dallas Cowboys, or at least Tony Romo, expecting the Dallas Cowboys to release him before free agency. Let's go to Mike and Mike with Ed Warder and hear it from the horse's mouth.
I'm in studio. We'll see. That remains to be seen here. Really.
The reason that I was turning to it is because I wanted to read directly from your tweet of yesterday that got everyone talking about Tony Romo, and then we'll work our way over to the latest news about Darrelle Revis and where we stand with all of that. But you tweeted yesterday on the subject of Tony Romo, and you tweeted a lot of things yesterday, so it's taking me quite a while to
I'm
get
a volume guy.
You're a volume guy. You are. You're a volume shooter. Well, bottom line is you tweeted that the Cowboys are going to release him. Yeah. They're not going to trade him.
I said that Romo expects that the Cowboys will ultimately release, not trade him, and that he believes he's capable of playing as a starter in the NFL for another 2 to 3 years. So he does not look at this as a one-and-done opportunity in terms of wherever he winds up. You know, the first thing that has to happen in all of this is that he and Jerry Jones have to have a meeting, and they have to discuss what their objectives are and how they can be mutually accomplished. I think most people believe the cleanest thing for the Cowboys, and obviously the most desirable outcome for Romo, is to be released like Peyton Manning was, so that he can then go solicit his own deal without some team having to compensate the Cowboys in a trade, which seems unlikely, or accept his contract, which is rather enormous. And obviously, if the Cowboys want cap relief, then the release is better than trading in this particular case.
So if that expectation is there, first from Dallas side, then how much are they eating? So the people understand the dead money involved.
It's nearly $20 million, regardless of what they do.
Over 2 years?
Well, they can split it if they release him and designate him a post-June 1 cut.
Right. Okay. To be clear, they can do that before June 1.
Yes.
Right? They can basically say
we're going to
he's getting released.
They can designate him as that. They don't have to wait till June 1st to do it. And so it would seem like it's in, the interest of both sides to do this as quickly as possible if they determine that Jerry Jones's first responsibility is to the betterment of his team. Now, he hasn't always done that. He's looked out for the benefit of his players first at times. I would cite DeMarcus Ware as a perfect example of that. Rather than holding DeMarcus Ware through the early portion of free agency as they tried to keep him and cut his salary, that was the Cowboys' goal. Instead, they turned him loose in free agency on the first day, and an hour later he was on a plane to Denver, never to be seen again until he was wearing a Super Bowl ring for John Elway and Peyton Manning and Von Miller. So that in that case, Jerry clearly looked out for the benefit of the player to his own detriment. And I don't think he's going to put Romo in a bad situation. Like, if the Cleveland Browns wanted to trade for Romo, then I could see Jerry trying to make that happen. Of course, Romo could just refuse to redo the contract, and the Browns would then have to be willing to pay him his salary, $14 million. But I think Jerry's going to try to do what is best for the Cowboys and, what's reasonable for Romo.
So let's play the game then. That winds up happening. He becomes a free agent in early March before the NFL's free agency period begins. And to be clear, even though he's a post-June 1 cap casualty, he can sign before then, right? So he's a true
really love the June 1st date, which means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, in reality, I guess, but whatever. We understand through your explanation why they have to do it that way. So let's go through the exercise. What then happens? What trips is he making, and who are the usual suspects?
Well, I assume he's going to have to sign for a deal that's incentive-based. Because somebody's going to be accepting a significant injury risk. I mean, Romo's only played 5 of the Cowboys' last 32 games. The last 2 times he's been on an NFL field and been hit, he's suffered fractures of either his clavicle or his back that resulted in him missing the rest of the year or a long period of time. So that's what whoever signs him, that's the risk that they're taking, and they're going to want to do an incentive contract based on that. So he's going to have a great deal of confidence that whoever he signs with, he can succeed with to meet those financial objectives, whatever they might be. And he's going to want to go to a team that he sees as capable of contending for a Super Bowl berth, something he's never accomplished. He's never been out of the divisional round with the Cowboys. So I think teams like everybody talks about Denver. Well, Denver has 2 quarterbacks. If you're going to have Romo, I think you do have to have some depth at that position for the very reason I just stated. I think the Houston Texans are a team that he will have a lot of interest in because it's close to Dallas. It eases the hardship on his family, allows them to come participate and see his games as they've done in the past. And if he looks at it from a football point of view, they've got pretty good offensive skill position talent, a reasonably good offensive line, and statistically the best defense in football, even without J.J. Watt, who's coming back. So I think those would be 2 teams. I've heard the Rams, I've heard the 49ers. Those don't fit the criteria that I've talked about. I don't think Romo would be as willing to go to those teams and make the kind of deal he would with one of these.
And unless those were his only options and he absolutely wants to still play football, I don't see those options either. I'm with you on like a Denver or Houston. Is he a guy, too, that if he goes to one of these teams, they have a lot of money in Brock Osweiler, didn't play well, and you just mentioned 2 quarterbacks in Denver. For any team that signs Tony Romo, is it still at the point where you sign him, he's our starter? He is inserted as our starting quarterback.
I think that's what he's going to want. Whether he's in a position to command that or not remains to be seen. I can't imagine you would bring Tony Romo in and expect him to compete for the job given what he's accomplished. He's more accomplished than Brock Osweiler. He's more accomplished than Trevor Siemian. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be a disservice to Romo not to say that if all goes according to plan and you're healthy, you'll be our guy. I think ideally the thing Romo would most want, he'd most want to stay in Dallas if he was going to be allowed to have an open competition with Dak Prescott, which is just not a reasonable expectation given what Prescott accomplished as a rookie last season and all he projects to mean to the Cowboys in the future.
Darren Woodson sat here and said if Tony Romo was on the Cowboys team next year and had to play the backup role again, that it wouldn't go as smoothly as it did this past year because he wants to play. Do you agree with that?
Well, I kind of think that, the sense I got was that Romo sort of slow played his return to health from the back injury he suffered in the preseason to the benefit of the Cowboys. Like he tried, the Cowboys wanted to avoid being put in the position of pulling Dak Prescott for Tony Romo while the team was winning. And so he was encouraged to, let's play along, let's make sure you're really healthy before we make this change, and it'll occur naturally. Well, that opportunity never came because they went to Lambeau Field and he won against Aaron Rodgers, and they went to Pittsburgh and they came back twice in the 4th quarter and won against Ben Roethlisberger, and the change was never allowed. So I think it'd be incredibly hard for Romo to go through an entire off-season training camp, the preseason, and then another year where he's the backup, and presumably he'd be doing it for less than his full salary. If he was miserable doing it last year for $20 million, what's it going to be like if he's doing it for $5 million? And how fair is that to Dak Prescott, who's starting and playing and winning, and he's making $500,000, and Romo, who made $25 million last year, is now making $5 million. Even if he was willing to accept that.
Right. The reality of the circumstances is they have to release him, and they most likely will, and so we'll see where he winds up. Ed Werder in our studio at the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best network.